A significant proportion of this nation is now in lockdown. Is that a proportionate response to the threat of this Delta strain?
Nat, regardless of whether it's a proportionate response or not, I think the message is absolutely clear to Australians, and that is the game is about vaccination now.
Hello, I'm Paul Barry. Welcome to Media Watch. And we're now 19 months into this crippling pandemic, and with many of Australia's towns and cities enduring another lockdown, the nation's being given a brutal wake-up call on the importance of getting vaccinated. As David Spears summed it up on Q&A...
Millions of Australians are in lockdown tonight, watching our national leaders scrap over vaccine, quarantine and how we get out of this COVID rut.
And asking the question posed by many Australians was Morrison's nemesis, former Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull.
Whether it is on the vaccination or the quarantine facilities, you have to scratch your head and say, how on earth could we have got into this situation?
Political infighting, a lack of vaccines and mixed messaging are among the reasons. And all were on display last week as Queensland's top medical officer told the under-40s not to get the AstraZeneca jab, which is the only vaccine Australia has plenty of.
I don't want an 18-year-old in Queensland dying from a clotting illness who, if they got COVID, probably wouldn't die.
And joining her in that slapdown to Prime Minister Scott Morrison was the Queensland Premier.
I do not think this is the time to risk the safety of our young Australians.
But the media response to both was swift, with a front-page whacking in The Australian.
Outrage at Premier's jab scare.
Beautiful one day, anti-vaxxing the next.
And Nine's political editor Chris Ullman was ropeable, saying Queensland had
attacked the credibility of a vaccine that we desperately need to dig our way out of this prison. It was breathtaking, and the only winners out of today are the anti-vaxxers.
If you're looking to blame anyone for Australians' fear of the AstraZeneca jab, it's hard to go past our politicians. But media reporting of the risks involved has been relentless. And with alarming reports like this from 7 News in April, it's no wonder people got worried.
The Therapeutic Goods Administration tasked to investigate the death of a recently vaccinated 71-year-old Sydney man and 55-year-old Darren Misson, who died in Tamworth Hospital after suffering a massive blood clot 8 days after his vaccine. The link to the vaccine, however unlikely, enough to spook locals.
I was shocked, yes, really, that it just brings reality.
It frightened me, actually. Because I was going to get it, and then I thought, no, I will not.
Neither of those two deaths has actually been linked to the AstraZeneca vaccine, according to the TGA. And this scare story from Tasmania 2 weeks later was also baseless.
Launceston man suffers limb-risking blood clot just days after AstraZeneca vaccine.
This is very serious. You could lose your leg.
Serious, maybe. But beneath the shocking headline came the admission that health authorities denied the clots were linked to the vaccine, and a revelation that the 82-year-old man
takes blood thinners and has 2 stents inserted in his leg due to his history of clotting.
And while we're talking alarmism, what about these stories from the ABC and the West Australian 10 days ago? About a woman in her 60s who died in a Perth hospital after receiving a COVID vaccine weeks earlier, which then conceded the death was not linked to a blood clot, and that, in fact, the woman did not have a blood clot before she died. So how did that even make news? Fears about the AstraZeneca vaccine first arose in March, almost as soon as the rollout began, with reports from Europe that it might be causing rare, fatal blood clots in around 1 in a million cases. Within 3 weeks, Australian authorities were also reporting blood clots linked to the jab.
Australia's vaccine rollout is tonight under scrutiny, with a man admitted to hospital suffering the same rare blood clots, which saw the AstraZeneca jab suspended in Europe.
And in mid-April came the first death in Australia linked to AstraZeneca.
A woman from the Central Coast, believed to be 48 years old, has died after developing blood clots.
Australia's latest COVID victim, Janine Norris, killed not by the virus, but by the drug designed to protect her from it.
The blow to public confidence was immediate.
And doctors are reporting cancellations of vaccine bookings following the death of a woman from blood clots.
And by late April, after 3 more non-fatal cases highlighted by the media, the public were giving the AZ vaccine the big thumbs down.
Australia's largest exhibition centre now a mass vaccination hub, but there's hardly anyone lining up.
So, did the media report those clotting risks responsibly, or did the constant direful coverage help to stoke the fears? Nine's Alicia Loxley had a shot at answering that question on Today in May.
The media is being attacked by some for reporting on the blood clots. So there's this sort of balance to strike where we have to report on it, but then it has to be put in context. There's a great, meme going around on Instagram saying you're more likely to die at a gender reveal party, and that's true. You're more likely to die every time you get into a car, more likely to die in a plane crash.
To be fair, many of the TV and print reports, or perhaps even most of them, did include riders like this one.
The TGA says many already had serious underlying health conditions and that the benefits of the vaccine outweigh its risks.
But whether the stories were on TV, in print or online, they often led the news, and it was always headline first, qualification later. And some of those headlines in response to changing vaccine advice were surely over the top. Like this Herald Sun front page.
Flirting with disaster.
Or this front page in the Adelaide Advertiser.
Astra own risk.
But it's also what the media choose to focus on and what they neglect that creates the problem. How often, for example, have we been able to put faces to the 910 people who've died from COVID in Australia, as this Herald Sun front page did last year when it took Dan Andrews to task over hotel quarantine failures? And why wasn't this story front page news everywhere? The remarkable case of the Sydney birthday party where the only people not infected were vaccinated. Too often, the media's attention has focused on the negative until last week's lockdowns saw a change of tune, and for once they began to push the positive with stories like this.
Luke is getting vaccinated with the AstraZeneca jab. He's 34.
So I can start living life as normal, go to Bunnings, and not feel worried that I'm going to get sick.
33-year-old student Eleni Saris has already had her first AZ jab. She urges others to do the same.
I'd like to be able to move and travel and for this sort of pandemic to progress in a more positive way.
And so began a stream of stories last week, like this one in the News Corp tabloids about why under 40s shouldn't worry about AstraZeneca vaccine. Or this one across Nine's news sites about how the Astra jab got the UK out of its mess. And in similar vein, on ABC News Breakfast last week, we had a Sydney GP saying he was happy to protect his patients against serious illness and adding,
I've got plenty of friends and family who are over in the UK and they've all had the AstraZeneca vaccine and they are just looking at Australia going, what are you guys doing? Like, just get on with it.
Last week, the media also reminded us of what exactly are the risks of getting the AZ jab. And as Nine's Chris Ullman put it,
the risks are vanishingly low. The chance of someone under 50 developing a blood clot from AstraZeneca is 3 in 100,000, with a 1 in 1 million chance of dying. By comparison, taking aspirin every day for heart conditions leads to 1 death in every 10,000.
Aspirin is still sold over the counter in this country, and I can't recall ever seeing a scare story about aspirin deaths. So why has the country and some of the media become so risk-averse and spread so much anxiety about a jab that should save lives? In a column last week in The Age and Sydney Morning Herald, Waleed Ali put his finger on Australia's problem.
Our relative success with COVID means we have to weigh up risks very few others do. If 5 young people die from a vaccine, we might well be comparing that to 0 COVID deaths. That's why our vaccine advice is so complicated, so nuanced, and so impossibly difficult to communicate to a vast population via the crude media we use for news.
The upside of this latest outbreak is it makes the risks more tangible. And on Friday, it prompted the PM to talk up the vaccine rollout and advance a new plan to get us out of lockdowns.
1 million doses in 8 days. 3.5 million doses or thereabouts in 1 month. We keep that pace up and we'll get this done, Australia.
And helping us get to the other side could be a national media less obsessed with case numbers, blood clots and adverse reactions, and more focused on the benefits of regaining our freedom. As infectious diseases expert Dr. Michelle Ananda Raja told Q&A,
the vaccines are going to give us hope, and they're going to be, the gateway to our freedom and to our liberation, and they're coming.
But until then, don't expect to wave goodbye to lockdowns, and don't expect the media to abandon one of its favourite pastimes, which is hunting down those who are unlucky enough to get infected. In May, it was Barbecue Man, whose name and photo were splashed across the front page of the AFR, which we blurred. This time round, it's the unvaccinated airport limo driver, thought to be patient zero in the Bondi outbreak, who has copped a media shaming. Kicking it off, 2GB's Ben Fordham revealed the man's first name and his employer, which we've beeped, and he dished out a bit of free character analysis.
I called up and said, he said, yes. And I said, it's Ben Fordham calling. I said, oh, do you work for in Bondi? I sent him a number of questions offering him the opportunity to have his say, and he hasn't answered any of those questions. And I'm not letting him off the hook because, as our last caller said, he is probably a drongo.
Charming. So, that was 11 days ago, and that night, Nine's A Current Affair scooped the rest of the media and spoke to the driver.
He actually wanted to come on and talk and speak for himself and clear his name himself, he says, but he's not feeling up to it just yet. He's not feeling well enough to do so. He's also really scared and concerned. He's obviously been receiving a lot of criticism, and he's worried about his safety and his family's safety.
And who could blame the limo man for lying low? Because, having missed that scoop, Channel 7 went the next step and cornered him at home.
Do you take any responsibility for this outbreak?
And 7 had a second serve, playing the driver's promotional video, albeit with his face blurred.
Welcome to Sydney, Australia. Come with us, we'll give you a good ride.
And next day, despite news that the driver had been cleared of wrongdoing and would not be charged, 7 made yet another home visit. And then last Thursday, the Daily Telegraph got its foot in the door, splashing his photo on the front page as he came out of 14-day isolation to go grocery shopping. The telly didn't show his face and did not name the man, but by then the damage was done, as 10 reported that night after also tracking him down.
Where are you off to now?
Vaccination.
Vaccination. Good luck.
Okay.
That limo driver and his wife came here to get their first jab today, and while they didn't want to appear on camera, they did speak to 10 News First, saying that they are heartbroken. The driver said his reputation is ruined and his life destroyed, and he's sorry. The couple say they have fully recovered physically, but restoring the damage may take much longer.
And who had caused or contributed to the damage? Oh yes, the media, including 10 News First. The driver's daughter told Media Watch,
I am hoping that this awful witch hunt can come to an end now and that my parents can just get on with their lives. They have been through enough.
But now, let's leave the COVID mess and go to a farewell that's sad for many journalists and even sadder for regional TV watchers.
And that's your news for this Wednesday, and it also brings an end to our much-loved 9 News Local. We've been privileged to tell your stories over the past 4 years, and I personally would like to thank you for inviting me into your home every night. And we leave you tonight with a look back at some of the stories that we've covered. I'm Samantha Heathwood, and from all the team, thank you for your company. Good night and goodbye.
Yes, last Wednesday, Nine bade a tearful goodbye to its 3 state bulletins delivering news to the bush in Queensland, Victoria and New South Wales.
For the very last time, I'm Natasha Soper. Enjoy your evening and have a good night.
Nine's regional viewers already lost their 15 local bulletins last year. So, what will they get now? Well, all Nine's programmes will now go out on Win. And as we told you last month, Win News has also ceased most of its local bulletins and replaced them with state-based news. Win won't say how many local journalists will lose their jobs, but it's likely to be many of them. Meanwhile, Channel 10's regional viewers, who were with Win, will also lose out because their new host station, Southern Cross Austereo, will only show city news bulletins and brief inserts like this one that aired across Queensland last week.
Good afternoon. Our lockdown is due to lift on Friday, but that'll be dependent on case numbers in the coming days.
That update lasted 2 minutes, had no pictures and touched on 4 stories. We asked Southern Cross if any journalists would remain in local communities. They declined to comment. But at best, as Sora Park from the University of Canberra told ABC Radio,
fundamentally it means fewer reporters will be breaking local stories, and they're the ones who traditionally kept local politicians and governments accountable.
So, how do these networks get away with abandoning local markets like this? Answer, because they can. Broadcasting regulator the ACMA told us while stations are required to produce news content, there is no requirement for localisation and no requirement to have journalists in local communities. Pathetic, isn't it? So what will fill the void? Answer, Sky News, which has struck a deal to broadcast on Win and most of Southern Cross Austereo from August the 1st, to the joy of SCA boss Grant Blackley.
We are delighted to be able to ensure regional Australians will have access to the high calibre and diverse programming this new partnership with Sky News delivers.
Sky's daytime news may well be high calibre, but it doesn't have any local or regional bureaus. And as Media Watch viewers will know, diversity of opinion all but disappears after dark. And former PM Kevin Rudd, Sky's chief critic, is not surprisingly concerned. As he told ABC National regional reporter Jeremy Story-Carter,
what I fear is it will entirely skew local debates about local concerns and local communities in a particularly mad direction.
But to others, any extra media in the bush is welcome. Wagga Wagga Mayor Greg Conkey became a target of Sky in 2019 when he purchased an electric pool car for his city.
It's just a bit of expensive virtue signalling on climate, isn't it?
But Conkey still welcomes Sky's free-to-air arrival.
If people don't particularly like Sky News, for whatever reason, they have that choice of getting the news from a different source.
Also keen to plug the gap are local governments, some of which now have sophisticated digital operations pumping out PR and local good news. Dubbo Regional Council in central west New South Wales even has its own slick TV bulletin on social media.
DRC News with Annabelle Hudson.
Hello and welcome. For the first time in 2 years, the Dubbo Showground will host the Dubbo Show, one of the largest agricultural shows in Western New South Wales.
It is real news from real journalists, but only if it fits the council's agenda. As Deakin Communications Professor Christy Hess told the ABC in May,
so many local councils now, they have 2 to 5 media relations officers who are all producing their own publications for the community. But those publications are not being scrutinised. They're not the types of publications that are putting a spotlight on a council budget or looking at a pecuniary interest register. There needs to be independent journalism.
And the lack of independent journalism is hurting local communities. A Google and University of Canberra survey last year of more than 2,000 regional news consumers found 60% believe media mergers and closures have had a negative impact on their local community. Almost half said it led to a reduction in local information, and around a quarter said it reduced the sense of belonging to their community. It's an important reminder of why local news really matters. That's all from us tonight. There's more on our website where you can stream or download the programme. And don't forget, Media Bites every Thursday online. But for now, until next week, goodbye.